Hello and welcome to the Uprising Show. And today I have a very special guest with me, Dr. Shweta Patel. Dr. Patel, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
And Dr. Patel, I would like you to give your brief introduction to everyone listening.
Sure. My name is Shweta Patel. I am a board certified OB-GYN practicing, and I am also the founder of Gaya Wellness, a women's health care startup, which is focused on providing increased access to high quality concierge level care to women, all virtually.
Wonderful. So before we go into your company, I would like to go back in time and tell me about your upbringing. Did you always wanted to be a doctor? Who inspired you to take this career path?
Um, Upbringing wise, I was actually brought up here mostly, though I was not born here. And I did want to always be a doctor. I was one of those uh, typical children that, played the operation game and wanted to pretend to be a doctor even when I was playing make believe. I think it was more along the lines of science was just where I had my affinity towards. And the only thing I thought I could possibly do differently was maybe because I was really good at debating. And by debating, I mean arguing with my parents. So I thought maybe I could be like in the law field. But it didn't appeal to me as much as the ability to understand the human body and to kind of use that knowledge and also use the ability to connect with people to help them have a healthier life. And so it was pretty early on that I wanted to become a doctor.
Are you the only doctor in your family from your parents and everybody else?
No, my sister, my older sister, she's also a physician. She is an internal medicine doctor and she's based in North Carolina.
Oh, wonderful. So it's kind of like you both were playing doctor, doctor.
No joke. We actually were. There were times when she was studying for her exams and I would like quiz her because I was so involved in what she was learning. I remember especially it was weird, but forensic medicine, which is where my true crime love started, I'm sure. But I would be like, what are some of the signs that somebody was hung? And she'd be like, okay, and she'd go through it and I'm like, probably 12 at this age. And that was like a good way to spend a Saturday afternoon. But yeah, so she's also a physician. And again, it was more both of us independently just wanted to be physicians. I think that, we were brought up in that culture of science and also I think being of the South Asian or Indian descent, you kind of do think that your power or superpower is limited to being in medicine or being in engineering, and so being like an astronaut just was never on my radar, or
Yeah.
even really, frankly, even being something like a pilot or doing something, that's considered so not per se normal here, but within the realm of possibility in children that are growing up here. And in fact, I would think it's so weird when I would see like a pilot in Indian movies. I'd be like, they have pilots in India? Like, I didn't know. How did they find them, or how did they get them to do that? Because I just thought, people in our country became doctors or engineers. And so I do think that culturally that did play some role, but it didn't become what drove us both through medical school, kept us there, made us finish it, and residency and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like I tell people too, like I got my license to do marketing by doing engineering first. So I had to earn it, right, to become a doctor and
Right.
engineer and then get to do it. So that's always
Yeah,
funny.
you have to pick
Um,
one of those two, and then you branch out.
yep, exactly. So yeah, you also served in the U.S. Navy for 13 years as a medical officer. How did you end up in the Navy?
So it was actually a postcard that I got in the mail, and this was right after I got accepted into medical school. And I'm pretty sure the universe was like winking at me. But the postcard said, "Accelerate your life, and we'll pay for medical school." It was the slogan back then for the U.S. Navy, just like for the Army, it was. I forgot what the Army was. "Be all that you can be" was the Army slogan, right? And so Navy was trying to be a little cooler. And I read that postcard, and the thing that like stood out to me was, "We'll pay for medical school." And growing up in a first generation immigrant family, I definitely was of the mindset that I'm not going to put this upon my parents as a financial, not per se burden, but like a responsibility. And so when I saw this opportunity, it was a no-brainer for me. Um, my parents had the reaction that I have, like when I think of other people in our country who are pilots, like, what? My parents are like, military? What? You, Indian people don't go into the military, and it's like, but we have our own military in India. How is that? But yeah, my parents were pretty upset, and sure enough, though, once they got to see what I was doing, how it was affecting my education in a positive way, they were not just on board, but actually pretty proud, and would not only just be like, "Oh, our daughter is a doctor," and be like, "Oh, she's a naval officer," like they were like loved sharing that little tidbit. So it was from that moment of wanting to make sure that I could financially go through medical school, and then after being commissioned and then doing the training, um, it just became about the culture. It is like joining another family, and the culture, the rules are very strong. And there are some things you don't like, and some things you want to like absolutely ignore. And then there are other things that you can't believe are done only there, and why not every family adopts these things, right? So with the Navy too, it was recognizing how to function within the realm of a team and not just have a single person mind, which is kind of the exact opposite of what, growing up, we're sort of cultivated to do, is to be independent, to think for yourself, and to, not rely on anybody else's help, just like be able to do everything and do it best, right? And so realizing that that really did have to be broken down before I could be an effective military officer, because it's not that the military does not support individuality, but it supports that individuality on a foundation of uniformity and of cohesiveness. And so most people don't have that foundation, and the only way to kind of get that is by building, breaking the building blocks down and sort of building back up. So that was an interesting experience for sure. But then by the end of it, I was a family member, and I became part of the family. Even leaving or getting out of the military was a very like emotional decision. It just felt like my identity. It felt like moving away from the hometown you've always known in the school and classmates you've always known, and being like, oh my God, who am I going to be when it's the new place that I go? So it was a great experience. I actually highly recommend it to anybody who's considering going the route of wanting to support themselves through higher education. That going the route of the military scholarship programs that are available, I think it's an excellent opportunity.
It is. I mean, a little bit of personal story here. I actually went to boarding school in India. There are 18 of those military school to join army. I wanted. My uncle was in Indian Army. He was my role model. My dad was in Air Force, and my younger brother right now is in Indian
They have an Air
Army.
Force in India? I'm
Yep.
just kidding.
so I have a very soft corner for obviously everybody who serves in different forces. So first of all, thank you for your service, and
My
it's
pleasure.
nothing gives me pleasure to talking to people who are connected to somehow in different services in either any country. To be honest, so
Right. And I mean,
that's a
hey,
great
right
thing.
back at you. Thank you for your, support and service, with your family being such a invested in the armed forces too.
Thank you. So yeah, there's a interesting thing that you mentioned about the mindset here, right? Breaking down the mindset and then switching from that individual to team thinking. So I guess the second thing to that would be also because your parents were immigrants to the US, and it's like there is this immigrant mentality of securing things. So when did you decide to make this leap to entrepreneurship? Did you have to again go through that breaking the barriers? How that happened for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's funny that as you were asking it, I was realizing I'm like, oh, it's happening all over again, isn't it? Oops, I didn't even notice. But yeah, I mean, I think the entrepreneurial spirit is not uncommon in our culture. Like in terms of being a merchant or a businessman, and being adapted to that kind of like exchange of service and goods with money. And I think that's part of the reason why we are as able, like our culture and South Asians or Indians are able to succeed so consistently in whichever country or culture they go to because of that like baseline entrepreneurial spirit. Oftentimes, the educational background that they have doesn't serve them in the country that they go to because of certification. So it's like that's one thing they have to fall back on is that spirit. So growing up, I do think that seeing my parents have that innately did make it more, commonplace for me to think in how I thought. For instance, real estate to me, or the process of something as simple as you buy land, you build a house, and then you sell it for more than you bought the land for and built the house for, and that means profit. I like it's a simple thing, but I knew that by like age five. Like it was just one of those things that you do, and I think that that level of just being exposed to it was extremely helpful. However, there's business and then there's operating a business, right? And very different things. And I have to really commend our, ancestors who have come here early on and gotten into businesses like hotels and gas stations and truly like operational businesses requiring, constant detailed monitoring of data and then pivoting to continuously grow and survive, because my god, that is not my forte, and I am now learning that it doesn't matter that it's not my forte. It better become my forte. And so it's like that breaking down of my mindset that you know as a physician, though we are technically scientists, right? The precision is really not there because it would be at the expense of the art of medicine, right? And
Hmm.
so that finesse, that relatability that we developed, or hopefully we already had in training, requires that we smooth around the corners in our technicalness. So that really doesn't help when it comes to operating a business, because it's like, well, yeah, that sounds like a good price. Yeah, that sounds like it'll be a profit that makes this thing work. Oh, yeah, sure. I think that ad worked. It got a decent response. If you're not someone who is very analytical, then you will quickly have to become someone who is very analytical while having hired someone to be analytical while you're training, because that is like from the get-go one of the most, I'm realizing, fundamental things about running a business. And so yes, it is rebuilding the blocks of how I operate this business, which is the Shweta Patel LLC. But yeah, it's a great experience, because I feel like oftentimes when we have accomplished certain levels of anything, or we've achieved a certain level of accomplishment, whether it's education, financially, we sort of get comfortable. It's like in our 40s, and it's like the prime time to get uncomfortable and start something again to keep challenging yourself and growing. And this is that for me. It is the opportunity to throw myself on the deep end, into the deep end, and learn to sink or swim. And I haven't had to do this since medical school. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
interesting. And I read not too long ago, actually, just last month, a very interesting quote about entrepreneurship. And my view has evolved over years what entrepreneurship is, but this was really stuck with me. And I forgot the name of the gentleman, but it was that entrepreneurship is really not about knowing everything, but entrepreneurship is about organizing everything. Can you organize everything? That's entrepreneurship. And the person gave an example that, the challenge is working in the business, on the business. So, and the true entrepreneurship comes with freedom and time, and that cannot happen if you are in the business. So that's
Right.
why that's what it meant.
Michael E.
And I
Gerber.
was like, yeah, exactly. So
I've read the book.
it
Yeah.
was, it's just such a fascinating thing, because when 10 years ago, if you would have asked me, I would have said, like, I need to know stuff and work on that thing that I know. And then that's how I built business. But that's not
Right. Or
true,
no,
actually.
let me just take care of it. The
Yeah.
number of times I say that in a day mentally, it's astonishing. And I think, I don't know if this was exactly the quote or the author you were referencing, but the book is E-Myth by Michael E. Gerber. Excellent book for anybody who wants a good starting point in business. And definitely one of the main things that's reiterated in that book over and over again is you've got to work on the business, not just in the business. And sometimes it's mutually has to be mutually exclusive. Like you just can't be working in the business and on the business effectively. And I think a lot of us become the employee of our business and then think that we are achieving entrepreneurial, lifestyle freedom. And it's like, no, now I'm my boss and I have to discipline myself when I don't wake up on time. And I have to like yell at myself when I, end the day really late because I'm not keeping balance. And this suddenly is really hard. So,
Yeah. So now talking about Gaia Wellness. So what was the moment or insight that led to the creation of Gaia Wellness? And also give us a little bit insight into what specific problem does Gaia solve, and how is this approach different from the existing solutions?
sure. Um, so the very first, essentially, inspiration behind it was when it was during the pandemic. And we had to switch over to either not seeing patients at all or seeing them over telemedicine. And telemedicine has been around for over a decade. It's not new. It's not novel. It's getting better and better. But really, the specialties that were reliant on it were predominantly non-surgical specialties and not any kind of area of medicine that required or had the opportunity to do procedures, right? So when it came to women's health, it was just considered a, a no-brainer that that wasn't going to work. So it wasn't really something we did. But when we had to, between nothing and something, it became a tool that we used. And, to my pleasant surprise, it was very effective because it dawned on me that a lot of the way I'm able to provide care to my patients in a way that is so effective for them and the reason that they feel positive about the experience by like having my support as their physician is because of the talking and the conversation, and they feel connected and heard. They feel like they have an understanding on what is going on and what their options are, and that's empowerment, right? If you're even when you're buying a house, the bank makes you go through so many documentations and goes through everything with you to the point where you're like, oh my God, let me just sign where I have to sign. And to think that, for something like buying a house, we spend that much time explaining stuff. But the amount of time that we sometimes spend explaining to someone how they're going to have their uterus pulled out of their body, it's like, well, we have 5 minutes, if that. So, but just sign here at the dotted line, right? And so I think that seeing that it was effective and then realizing that there was even more potential to be for it to be used was where it started. But then the pandemic came to a relative end, and we went back to seeing patients in person. And I actually requested that I continue to see my patients or in a virtual first model,
Mhm.
where I essentially will determine if they need to physically come in. I was denied that because I was working in a hospital system and did not have the final say on how I run my own practice, even because it was not technically my own practice. I was sort of the face of it. And so that made no sense to me, right? And one of the most quickest ways to get under my skin is to tell me it's just the way we do things. Because I'm like, no, it's not practical, it's not sensible. We can do it better. And the real reason, I believe, is because it was not financially sensible to do that, which I get now because running a business, it's like you have to be open to be able to have any positive impact on anyone. So they do have their primary responsibility of financially growing and surviving, which just happens to be in direct conflict at that moment with my responsibility and interest of wanting to give the patient the best care possible. And so that's essentially how my separation from the hospital system and inpatient care started. And then while I was getting ready to revamp women's health and have my own brick and mortar location that was going to be amazing, where I did everything the way I wanted to in my previous practice, and realizing, during that research phase of running a practice, the operational overhead was nonsense. And it necessitated seeing patients like some kind of a machine line, and it necessitated dropping or foregoing the finesse and the relatability and the time so that you can have enough patients seen to then be open again tomorrow to do it all over again. It felt like what's that story of that robot that just keeps like vacuuming up its own blood, and it's like it's defeating the point of doing it because it's literally draining its own blood as it's suctioning it right back up. And it was very poetic to me because I'm like, that's our healthcare system, right? We're only burning gas to then continue to run so we can continue to burn gas again. And so that's where I decided, what if we were to operate only virtually, or at least predominantly virtually? And that would allow for our operational costs to be extremely low and controlled. And then we can let that positively impact the consumer, and allow for the entire process to be simplified in the favor of the patient. And essentially, that's where it began. That's how the model for Gaya was developed. And in the interim of when it came to, well, what happens if you do need in-person care, right? Well, I'm not doing a pap smear through the screen, I promise. But when a service like that is necessary, in-person physical exam or procedure, then I collaborate with physicians that are already in the community and they already have their practices and they're already struggling to keep those practices financially viable. So to me, it was like a synergistic relationship because now I'm, actually using existing infrastructure to provide my patients care without actually including that, service under my overhead. And the impact it has on the existing physicians in the community is that they're getting a higher complexity and higher RVU patient with a bow on top. and their day now just kind of got to become a higher value day because all of the smaller things that didn't really require an in-person visit is being sort of frontlined by my company. So it's win-win. And I think for the patient, they don't actually, as long as they feel like they are being advocated for and they feel like they are aware of what's going on, um, they think it's a better experience because it's, even though it's, seeing and talking to one doctor who explains everything to you, and then possibly going to a different doctor in person to have everything that may have been explained to you done, they still feel more prepared, right? Just like when you have a safety um, drill or a safety, what do you call those things? Like when you're on a plane, you don't have to see the pilot flying the
Right.
plane to know that they are doing a good job, right? You know that it's happening, and you rely on the people that are in the cabin and serving you to feel secure, right? So
Right.
same thing. I think that there is a way to become more efficient and more pragmatic in healthcare that unfortunately doesn't um, you know, come intuitively to the current corporate model. And so this is the small business way of sort of chipping away at this old school mammoth of a dysfunctional healthcare system. And hopefully at some point it will be something that we do transform into a more effective model.
Yes. There's a little bit of unpacking to do here. So one is uh, like from a patient's perspective, right? Like, and I'm coming from patient's perspective, and I'm in Pittsburgh. UPMC is here, and they actually. It's funny that when I or when my wife we were trying to get the appointment and we are trying to do this, and there are some appointments whereas we wanted them to be telemed or on phone, and they still wanted us to come in, and then when we spoke to them that, hey, this could have been like an appointment on telemed, why didn't you do that? I was like, oh really, you wanted that? And so I don't know if more people want this. I don't know, but my choice is like if this could function. So one thing in my mind as a patient is there is no like black and white answer here, right? There needs to be not like you just can't force to come for everything there. And of course, there are things that can't happen everything on telemed. So one thing is this thing like it needs to. There's no like one way to go here. It has to be pragmatic enough, like you said, that things need to happen through telemedicine, that needs to happen through telemedicine. And the things that, even though they are high value procedure, now it's actually maybe straight up work. The patient goes, get the test, pap smear done. And there's no, the thing that you've done, they don't have to do that building of relationship, they don't have to, because it's a different kind of setup now, because the relationship is with you, because you are the main provider for that case. So it's surprisingly to me, it just makes so much sense that whatever you said, it feels like obvious to that level, and
Healthcare doesn't do
but
obvious.
yeah, exactly. So I guess the barrier I would like to, I guess, ask you from, because you are on the provider side and also with this business. So does it really cut the reimbursements? Is it like it's you go on a loss with it compared to, because you're not doing that in-person part, but then you have to rely on, again, feel the burden of increasing the volume? Is that the pressure you still have, or the system is there, at least some health plans are in that positions where they're making sure telemed is equally covered, so you're actually not still going underwater, but with you can live with the same amount of patient without, again, feeling the burden that now to just run this thing I need to see 10 more patients a day. Where are you with that? Give us a little bit insights on that.
So I gotta hand it to you, man. You ask really good questions. Like, holy moly! If I was ever wondering if you were actually listening to what I was saying, I have no doubts because your questions are so pointed. But so there is a specific law about parity, parity, in telemedicine, where the states who have parity will reimburse as if it's the same amount when a patient is seen in person versus as telemedicine. However, the way they do that is by how much time is spent with the patient over telemedicine and how many systems are discussed. And that's how we determine the complexity of the visit, and then that's how it's reimbursed. Versus in person, that can be done by examination and not talking, and so it can be done faster. So there is still that element of, it will be faster to do a high complexity visit in person than it would over telemedicine. So technically the answer is no, there isn't a difference in the reimbursement rates of the complexity of a visit, but yes, there is a difference in how we can achieve that complexity. And whereas achieving a level 3, complexity visit on a telemedicine encounter would require a decent amount of conversation, which means it limits the number of patients you can see in a day. It is more quickly accomplished in person, which means you can see possibly 50% more to maybe even double the number of patients, and therefore your revenue is higher. And then I also think that my physician colleagues are, when it comes to, the first, let's be honest, the one thing that they forgot to mention about the human body in medical school was how to operate a business, which is apparently a very important thing. Finances are not particularly the forte of doctors. And that is a general statement to make, and obviously it's not accurate for everyone. But it's like saying certain cultures are not known for their height, right? And same goes for certain cultures are not known for their, hair. Like some are hairless, and others are very hairy, like our culture. So same thing when it comes to physicians. I think that we never really got a good grasp on how to make money in medicine, and our relationship with that concept is also sort of not, it's definitely downsized or made to be less important. And I wonder how much of that is because, it somehow is like a tainting of the relationship that the physician and the patient should have, and the physician responsibility to the patient is independent of that financial exchange, which is true. But that doesn't mean that the physician has to be unaware of how that financial exchange occurs and how it's even calculated, but we mostly are. And so not knowing how to really get the full value of the care you provide, I think serves as a huge disadvantage to physicians. And they do rely a lot on a team of other people to calculate that and outsource that, and so that their overhead gets larger and larger and larger. And with that lack of skill or weak skill set, I think that it seems like it's a better job to work in an in-person practice. It seems like it's a better job to be a physician employee, because then all you have to worry about is that, six-figure number that they wrote in your contract, sometimes 7 if you're one of those specialties, and you just see that huge carrot. You don't see how many hours you will work to sustain that carrot. You also don't see how much that carrot is now going to cost you to keep because of taxes. You are not factoring in how much individually patient workload that will be, not just how many hours, but like how busy those hours will be to sustain that income. And so it seems like doing something like telemedicine would be small taken to little in earning when you compare it to the 6-figure, 7-figure revenue that you can generate out of a practice, even in OB-GYN, which is not one of the higher end specialties when it comes to cost and revenue. I had partners in that practice that I worked with before I separated and went on to my own. They were generating 1.5 million in take home value. They were also working from like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and they were seeing close to 55 to 60 patients a day. And I'm not sure how you divide up an hour like that and document and do a physical exam. I mean, I know it's like the NASCAR team, right? Like, and then you're on to the next patient.
Yeah.
So I think that the um, it looks like we're getting farther with the way it currently is, but
Yeah,
it's
but
actually not.
yeah, but also like you said, right? Like at the end of the day, to yeah, you will get more volume. Then again, you can increase your top line, but again, your margin will go down because you'll have more physicians. So it's still a puzzle to figure it out. You still need to find out that balance, and which makes me also thinking like broadly, right? At the end of the day, having these kind of business model like yours, it also help you in preventative care a lot, and which makes me wonder that I don't know if it's there. Again, this is more like a question from a novice, that does value-based care play more? Is there incentives coming in this direction more towards you with this model? Can you make a case for that? Because now at the end of the day, it's going to save money later, right? So
Right.
you're handling it upfront, right? So what, where are you, what's like, is it existing at all or non-existent on your end?
I think that it definitely is in the works, um, but I think we have a long way to go in making value-based care more financially valuable
Hmm.
for the physician who's operating it. Um, I think ultimately, in the immediate future, people keep solving the problem of a higher overhead by generating higher revenue. And then
Okay.
that sweet spot of time where it actually leads to profit before the higher revenue generates higher overhead again, and then they have to do it all over again. And it seems like the concept of, or we can just reduce our overhead so that we don't have to keep increasing how much we're generating and we still take home the same piece of the pie. It's just we're not spending so much of that pie away. And that to me is the immediate solution because it still again seems like you're generating so much like peanuts in comparison, right? But what you take home and what you expend of yourself as a physician doing telemedicine um, is grossly different. And I would beg to say that it is not peanuts because though I may be generating lower revenue, I'm taking more of that revenue away, as in like it's more of that is actually coming to me because of the overhead costs being low. My expenses are low, so whatever revenue I generate, most of it comes to me versus like 40 to 30% of it in an in-person practice, if even. And the other part of it is how much quality of life and quality of practicing medicine that returns to me when practicing in this setup, where being able to practice from home and the number of physician mothers that would appreciate the ability to do that. I mean, it's not just it's a huge thing, right? The guilt that comes with being away from your kids and not being at home when you're growing up. And it's not just for women, but I do know that one of the biggest incentives would be like during maternity leave, the ability to still provide care and generate some revenue instead of just being feeling like you're home, not producing, and you're taking care of your newborn. And then you know that impending doom feeling of like, all right, well, at the end of 6 weeks, I'm gonna have to somehow figure out how to remotely take care of my child because I'm gonna have to go back to work. Um, or or even the ability to like for me, I love practicing from remote locations. There is nothing more fun for me than to be in a different city and even on vacation vacation for me no longer exists because I can be on a trip somewhere, and if my patients need me, I'll be like, oh, let's just get on a call. It's informal to a level that is reminiscent of the good old days where you could go up to the doctor's house and be like, hey, we've got something going on. And the doctor's like, well, come on in, let me just take a look, right? And that sounds silly in these days because we have so many boundaries that we like to maintain. But there's something to be said about the ability to exchange with a patient like that again, to be able to feel like you are truly actually affecting their health immediately, not just at some point when they eventually show signs of improvement. Um, and to be able to do that from the comfort of your home or your preferred location or while traveling or while pursuing your other interests, like let's say you're giving talks or you're teaching and you're going traveling for that, and you're still able to you're bringing your practice with you wherever you go, and your patients don't feel that hiccup in your lack of availability. I think it's huge. And I mean, I'm not going to bring it up, but I'm going to bring it up. Just think of how many. Do you remember when they were comparing the smog over LA during the pandemic? I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, there's something to be said about remotely working and the benefits that it has on reducing our need for, driving and just basically how much consumption of fuels, time, right, in transportation. So it makes sense to me. It's like so logical that we all embrace a virtual first model. Like you said earlier, it's not like in-person evaluation is going to go away. I think the term physician means physical. It's built into it. We're never going to really, well, let me not say never, because in the Alien movie, I mean, I do think that she operates on herself with a robot. So, but there's going to always be a need for a physical interaction, whether it's with a droid or a human. And so it's more about reallocating our resources so that we are using them more effectively. And it becomes like that example of a can, and you have sand and pebbles and rocks and golf balls, and it's like, put all of this into the can. And you can start with the sand and you won't be able to get half of the other stuff in, or you can start with the golf balls and then this next thing up, and everything sort of fits into place, and it's like magic. How did we do it? And it's just reallocating how we make everything fit and work. And I think that's just what virtual first is.
Well said. So, speaking of your company, and it's been a few years now since your launch officially, and how has been the growth been since then? Could you share how big is the operation now, and how many patients you are seeing on monthly basis?
Sure. So it's been 2 years, and it's grown, but it's at that level of we can either now inject more financial resources into the company and then scale, or we can indefinitely cruise without any additional growth, because we have just enough to cover our expenses and we break even, and so it's fine. Um, so I definitely think that the comfort level of, oh, it's a wheel and it's working, the wheel turns, right, did kind of set in, because it's like, well, we're not really testing this wheel at a high speed yet, now are we? And in order to do that, we're going to have to make this operation first, prepare it to be scalable, and that requires more skilled resources for people that have done this before, to kind of, when it comes to, like I always say, I don't even know what I don't know when it comes to running a startup, or making a startup start it up. and getting it to a phase where it no longer sounds like it's a startup. It's something that exists and it's running well. Um, so having that kind of a team assembled, where you're not abdicating the throne, you're still in the operations of it. You still are learning everything, but you're learning from people who are experts and know what to expect and how to navigate those hiccups. Um, so we're at that phase right now. In terms of how many patient consultations, since launch, we've done approximately 900 over the 2 years. We have 35 recurrent memberships when it comes to like the subscription model. We're a combination of a subscription model and a D2C direct pay as you go offer and model. And we're not actually accepting insurance. This is purely self cash pay. I think that the ability to accept insurance is going to demonstrate whether I'm honestly not sure. I think that it's going to increase our operation, like our revenue, and or at least it's going to increase our volume. The revenue is to be seen, right? But I do think that what's more in terms of increasing our volume is that when we start marketing to a larger audience, and while figuring out that proper market fit, I wanted to limit it to what limited dollars I had allocated for marketing because we're bootstrapped. I wanted to make sure that I was using it over a audience size that would at least have a decent density of impact, rather than being like, here's $5,000 for marketing this month. Let's market to the whole country, right? And
Yeah.
you're not really effectively using that dollar. So I decided to market to the Central Florida area, which is where I used to practice, and really marketing to my existing patients, and using them as a catapult to launch Gaya, and really figuring out from their feedback what was working, what was not working, and then expanding on the services so that it was no longer just a single service of women's health, but now actually separated into fertility care, behavioral health care, yes, gynecology, and weight loss, hormonal care, and then eventually maternity and postpartum care as well. And so that women can get the specific care they need, but it's still all in one location, in one centralized platform. And a lot of our resources went into developing those distinctions. So our marketing was always kind of limited to that micro community area. And now, as we're getting ready to scale, and I'm putting together a team of the right kind of, chief marketing officer, chief general counsel, a operational officer or chief operational officer, and really getting the people who've been there, done that, and can write a book on it, essentially, and paying the money, putting it in, right, and getting the experts to do what they do so that now they can take what I've essentially created to be proven, on a very small scale, and take that plant out of the pot and put it into the ground and make it grow into a field. So I think that is where we're at. And my goal is to be VC ready, like to debut in the VC ball, by the end of this year so that we can really be positioned as a proven concept. We've demonstrated not just profitability on a small scale, but on a national scale. And we can demonstrate that this will just become even more financially lucrative for the investor when even more money is injected. It's not something we need money for to make it work. It's something we need money for to make even more money.
Right.
And so that's where we're at right now, and where we're going in the immediate next 6 months.
Reminds me of because I was in New York the whole time. Only last year I moved here, so it reminds me of Parsley Health. Um, Dr. Robin Berzin, who's the founder, and I was when she was still running her practice, I was head of marketing for this patient messaging platform that I was trying to reach out to her for selling her. So I had conversations with her, and at that point, she was telling that she was going to go this route, build this subscription model, and launch it, and then happened to be Carbon Health at that time, also evolving on West Coast. So kind of replicating that model into this primary care practice with the holistic integrative
Right.
approach to that, and that's how she scaled that. And it's it's a playbook used in different ways already, and I'm sure you're probably keeping an eye on those people who were there, or also the playbooks that's been used to scale these models.
Hmm.
The interesting part is it's I see you added other things as well, like other weight loss and all those
Hmm.
things have been added, which makes more sense because the more holistic it is, the it's
Right.
also helps patient, but also helps the business. Um, and then there is a whole different side of this, right? Like this whole one of the companies where I'm advising on growth is their focus on um, weight loss telemed and addiction medicine telemed,
Hmm.
and they build a whole platform on that, and so they're doing it that way. So I've seen that world too, like how they're growing and how that's working. So um, do you right now, is it only Florida license, or is it also in other states you're having
So
patients?
it's Florida, Virginia, North Carolina, and Indiana, and soon to also include Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, and New York. And then
Okay.
as we are able to hire additional physicians, then we'll be selecting a lot of that based on how many licenses they already have.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Because it's as simple as that. We can become national overnight by just hiring 5 physicians that each have 20 licenses. I know I
Yeah.
did not do the math correctly there, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Yeah, the key thing here is always, in your case, it's not a problem because you're right now not doing insurance. It's probably slightly more easier. Otherwise, there is this credential cycle that you have to go through,
Oh yeah,
getting
no,
all
it's
the thing right. So that's another
yeah.
pain that you
Talk about
avoided it.
another system that's just
Yeah, because
funding. Oh my
a
god.
few companies where I advise, the growth is stalled in new regions because of that. Like it takes 90 days to credential, at least 100 days, and then it takes time to get the people, and by then it's like it's a very providers are shortage, like always shortage. So you need to get them quickly if you have to,
Yeah.
right? That's another thing. Interesting. And I saw on your roadmap, you're planning to launch this B2B service line. What's that? Like you're going to go to employers and offer them packages?
Yes.
Is that the plan? Interesting.
Absolutely. So, one of the things that is becoming more recognized now in small businesses as well as corporations is that our services for healthcare when it comes to our female employees could be better, right? And not just female employees in general, our health services could be better in that we could be focusing more on preventative care and mental wellness. And I think that with that, the extension of that was also recognizing, like, oh, you know, in mental wellness for women, like there are some pretty critical times where that becomes even more necessary, like when a woman's going through hormonal changes. So it would be probably prudent to provide extra services for support for menopause or for support for, when a woman is on her cycle or going through maternity or pregnancy. And so I think that by providing this as a supplemental product, not obviously a primary product, but a benefit, like when you add vision and you're like, hey, not only do we cover dental, but we also add in free vision. And it's like, oh, a nice little perk. I am envisioning that Gaia will be that kind of a, premier service that employers can start offering to their employees as a benefit that not only gives them the support they need, but is also a way to attract employees because of what it means about the company that's providing it, right? Like it's an inclusive culture. It's a culture that is sensitive to the needs of a woman. And that is very clearly stated when you say like, oh, by the way, we're providing you with a subscription where you have access to a physician who will support you through any kind of life changes that you're going through. And, it's advantageous to the employer because it's all done virtually. They don't need PTO for this. They can be on their lunch break and access to care can be, accomplished. So I think that, and preventative care too, again, it's like how many work hours are lost because of sickness. And if we could make care, preventative care, more easily accessible, i.e., not needing to take a day off to then not spend it with your family, but to go and get your, colonoscopy, woohoo, what a way to party. And instead of like, or getting blood work done, or going to the doctor so you can get all the orders to get all this done. Rather than that, like being able to talk to a doctor directly without taking time off, and knowing that you can get blood work, you can get imaging orders, and you can get it all done, and the doctor can review it with you, and then you're done. You didn't have to take any extra time running around, finding the doctor, making an appointment, going to the office, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that improving the employee general baseline health will also be advantageous to the corporation, and that is obviously a big picture, long game goal for them. But I think that it's definitely still something to look into as a mutual benefit for both the
Yeah, I
employer
mean,
and employee.
there is so many things. Not to say America is behind, but it is behind in healthcare because I've lived in Germany and my friends who I see it from here who are getting pregnant, they get 1 year of paid maternity leave, 1 year, right? So it's like so hard to even think about that in America. Let's just to talk about that.
Yeah,
It's such an outrageous idea, right? So, but it's happening. Germany is
right.
one of the most productive countries labor wise, labor workforce wise, like most
Yeah.
efficient, and it's happening. So uh, there are different reasons. Let's say in US why we don't have it. Then I don't buy the productivity thing because it's already been proven and it's been running. It works much better. So and also on the, like you said, there's so many things, preventative care on the women's side. There is much more needed that doesn't happen. I get the idea of this, sure, equality and blah, that's there. But at the end, the human bodies are two different bodies, and one goes through everything. Like I've seen my wife getting pregnant 2 times, and it was like a 4 year cycle for us, like in that period from first ectopic pregnancy to then second one happening, and then our IVF failing after that, and then we're
Oh
again getting
God.
natural pregnant. It's so different, right? It's so many things you go through, and this 4 years just went by like we
Wow.
don't know, right? So, and I know people who are going through this like at X scale. We were lucky to, like things happen in one go, even though didn't go in like, easier way. But it's like so much of mental health, so much of, I
Mhm.
speak to other founders, some of them, startup founders, and they're going through this, managing business while also doing this.
Mhm.
It's like, I can't fathom the fact that there is not, these are things not talked about. It's crazy.
Mhm.
So it's only like I discovered through my experience, so I can talk. But otherwise, I would have been like, I don't
Mhm.
know, right? Like I don't know. So it's crazy to me because uh, we are in 2024, so it's crazy in that
Yeah.
way.
and
So
and the element of morale is completely sort of overlooked in the process of the work culture, the worker bee culture that we have so effectively created. Um, and it's something as simple as, it doesn't even have to be your own house or even your, you know, family's house. But if something is going on in your life and you need time off for that, and you're met with by your colleagues at work, right? The really, sure, I guess I'll pick up your work so that you can go do this. That's necessary. Sure, I get it. But still, it's annoying me because now I'm working more. Um, the morale impact that that has, it's like this person is no longer coming to work with the mindset to do their best and top notch, right? They're coming to work thinking that this is no longer my people. This is where I come to work, and I'm going to get what I need to get done, and I'm going to go back to my people at home because these people don't care about what happens to me outside of here, right? And the simple shift in mindset of when a person thinks of their work environment as their own or as a like a foreign entity separate from themselves, it's evident in like the franchising model, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there are companies that were not performing well in a corporate franchise because they're being run by regional managers. And simply by shifting them into actual owners of the franchise and their productivity and their revenue both through the ceiling. And it was just that. It was you now have skin in the game. And this is no longer something that is separate from you. This is yours. Um, so when we sever that because there's not a sufficient setup of support in the work environment, we are drastically decreasing not just our productivity in volume, but our quality of whatever we are producing. And but we look like we're doing a lot, right? We're making lots of movements, so we must be such a productive like workforce. And it's like, no, but we're miserable, we are overweight, we are high blood pressured, and most of us are in unhealthy relationships, whether it's with food, alcohol, or a person. And yeah, we don't like what we do. I was like, oh.
Yeah. Uh, but then we have
Well,
people
let's talk
like
about
you.
like bears or puppies now, can we? Because like, man, this was way to
Yeah.
dissect the entire, you know.
Yeah, I say always that healthcare is a business of heart. Like you have to have the heart. And I also speak with a lot of investors in different areas, right? Like sometimes get a investors from software world investing in home care. They don't understand why it's only such a low margin because this is home care. You don't understand how this works. You can't come with that frame of mind. You need to have a
Right.
heart for it. You need to see the impact, right? So it is important, right? So but also gives me hope in that way, right? Still people like you are trying to come up with these new models and new ways of getting us where we should be, right? So that's the reason why this show is also exists, is to bring that optimism, because there are days when I feel in last 10 years in healthcare I felt very demoralized, and I have to pick myself up back again and go again, right? To the level that there were a couple of 3 years, 3 2 3 years when I took, like, I gotta go to do marketing in enterprise software. I can't. So, but
It's a
as
lot.
human as we are, so we got but I got back again, but more like a pull versus a how it is. But that's the reality. But again, we are also here for the optimism, the change that's happening. This is why I'm excited about talking to people like you on this show. Well, this has been great. I know that the time has just flew by with this conversation. I had more questions, but I guess I'll park it for now. But
Sorry, I
um,
talk so
I,
much. I really do. It's a
no, this is
problem. I
great.
know.
This is great. I do want to ask you one last personal question that I ask every guest, and it was more like I asked, like, tell me about, or tell us about a personal thing that no one in your professional circles know about it, and this is your chance to share it. Could be anything that you want to share.
In my professional circle, that no one knows about in my professional circle.
Hmm.
I mean, this is the problem with being a very callously transparent person. I wear my entire life on my sleeve. So I think I was gonna say like maybe I want to the fact that I want to have a dog or animal sanctuary. Nope, everybody knows about that too. Um, the fact that I have a startup. Nope, everybody knows about that too. I'm actually often giving my card to people at the hospital and being like, hey, if you need something, just use this here, use this promotion code. And so um, everybody knows I'm single. Everybody knows when I'm not single. I have nothing. I got nothing.
Okay, okay,
And the
we'll
quickest
leave it
way
to
to my
that.
heart is, or if I'm on any level upset, angry, or unproductive, just give me a puppy,
There you go.
a loaner
Okay,
puppy. I mean, I don't have to keep it. I
yeah.
will, but I mean, I'm saying like, send me
Preferred
a
is
puppy
lower.
and it will fix it. It'll fix it.
Okay, great. Well, again, this has been great. Thank you for your time. How can our listeners find you? Where can they find you?
Oh yeah, sure. So the usual suspects like LinkedIn, and you can search by first and last name, Shweta Patel. You can also search Gaya Wellness. That's Gaya. And on Instagram, my personal handle is OB-GYN Kenobi. And and you can also look me up on Facebook with just my first and last name. Yeah. So
Okay, great. Well, once again, thanks for your time. Much, much appreciated. This has been great. Thank you.
thank you for having me. This was fun.